How's it, everybody? Welcome back to me, the Fontainer. Breaking news is that Newcastle have identified a site for a new £200 million state-of-the-art training ground. Great news. Newcastle have announced that they eventually are going to be building a state-of-the-art training facility, and I've been crying out for this. If you've seen any of my previous videos, where do we start? We've got to start with how the news broke. The news broke by a respected Geordie journalist, which is Craig Hope. This is a very, very respected journalist, and we suspect that the club will be announcing it in the days to come. The first thing to confirm is that they've identified that the location, I'm going to butcher this, apologies for my Geordie accent. They've determined that Woolsington, which is land which the former chairman Sir John Hall previously owned, and had proposed for a club training ground in the past, is the ideal plot for the new training ground. There were other sites at Seaton Burn and North Tyneside which were under serious consideration, but it looks like Woolsington is the space and location which is going to be the new space for the training ground. Now, if we talk a little bit about the current training ground, we know the facilities are far from state of the art. It has had a little bit of lipstick put on it over the last couple of years. I think they upgraded the cafeteria, some of the gym facilities, but there's almost 200 staff working there at the moment. So definitely a lot of infrastructure and finances being poured into the club at the moment. Everyone knows that the current facilities at Benton are 4 out of 10, League One quality in terms of the facilities and the space which are on offer for the players. The other thing which is not ideal is that currently the first team, the youth team and the women's team are all separate. It would be best practice for all of the teams to be in one location. We're looking at spa facilities, we're looking at daycare for children, and obviously several indoor and outdoor pitches, as well as a mini stadium for matches, are amongst the amenities which have been considered. Newcastle are looking to spend £200 million on a new training facility. Let's not forget the Saudi owners bought Newcastle for just over £300 million a couple of years ago. So this is a significant investment into the club. There was a lot of talk about how much money PIF was spending on things like Live Golf and Formula One, rugby and tennis and all different sorts of sports. And there was a feeling amongst the Newcastle fans that we were kind of not being prioritized, in the sense that of all of the different portfolios and sports that PIF are currently involved in, that Newcastle wasn't very high on the agenda. £200 million is a significant investment. Now, why is training facilities important? I've spoken about this before. If you think about the day-to-day place of work where the players go, other than on match days or other than days when they are off or traveling, this is their home base. This is where Eddie Howe, whoever the management team is, or the physios or the coaches, this is where they impart all of the wisdom and tactics on the way Eddie Howe wants to play. And to deliver that message on a kind of vertical, physical sense, you need to do that in great facilities. If anyone's seen the Bournemouth documentary about how they built their facilities and where they are now as a regular Premier League club, this is what Newcastle need. We need the best physio or the best medical departments, places where guys can have scans, and the ladies team as well. Places where, from a tactical perspective, Eddie Howe can have his team speech on great tech. The company that are looking at this are the same company that built the Real Madrid and Spurs training ground as well. So you can't knock PIF for, looking at best in class. I do think this seems to be something which David Hopkinson has pushed through. Darren Eales, bless him, obviously had a lot on his agenda with regards to his health issues, but I think David Hopkinson is starting to action a couple of things on the to-do list in terms of improving the infrastructure of the club behind the scenes, the stadium, the staff, the training ground. Eddie Howe obviously has, full control on the football and the way that we play, you know, match days, etc. We've got Ross Wilson as the sporting director as well to help out on the January sales and player recruitment. We've seen Sven Botman has just signed a new long-term contract until 2030 as well. So that will have been all to do with Eddie Howe and his view, as you know, in terms of what he sees in Sven Botman. But obviously all the T's and C's, you know, the increase and the salary has all been arranged by Ross Wilson, because that's his job. And this is something which, you know, when we look at what Eddie Howe was saying at the end of last season, we need to be actively fast in the transfer window. We weren't. We spent the whole transfer window chasing players left, right and centre, sold Isak right at the end, and then eventually bought Voltemade and Visa right at the end of the window. So this is very good news to eventually see wheels in motion about the infrastructure of the club starting to be increased. It's going to be really exciting to see the renders or the 3D images of what the club is envisaging the facilities will look like. They have said they are looking to start in 2026. A year's worth of planning, a year's worth of engagement, a year's worth of finalizing all the plans, etc. seems to be enough. I mean, in my day job, I've recently moved my company from one building to another building in London, and the impact that can have on people is enormous. Having people excited to come to the facility, to be proud of that facility, to be able to show off your skill and your talent in a home that your company, and in the sense Newcastle, is providing for the tons and tons of back of our staff. I've said already, there's more than 200 people in the IT, the HR, the communication, the legal, the marketing teams, you know, all the medical staff, all the coaches. It has to be at a state-of-the-art stadium that you can use as a springboard to do your day-to-day work, which all leads up to match days on a Saturday and Sunday in the Premier League, or European games midweek, or as we see now, cup games as well. It all adds to the foundation of the club, elevating the status of the club, attracting new players to the club. You know, we've seen so many instances on transfer deadline day, players going into the training ground. You know, that feeling when you're walking into something represents what the club is, what the future of the club is, the strategy, the long-term vision. And if you're walking into a place that's got wheelie bins filled of ice, with all due respect, the entrance to Newcastle, you know, it was a hazard for kids. You know, kids were almost getting hit by cars there, players being chased in their cars by kids, you know, overzealous, excited kids. It's not ideal. So this is long overdue. As soon as Newcastle have any formal announcement on it, I'll be straight on sharing that information with you. Do you think, you know, I'd be interested to hear in the interim what your views are. You know, are training grounds an important part of an infrastructure for a club? You know, would you rather we focus more on the stadium? You know, we do know that money spent on training facilities don't count towards current PSR rules. We know also they're not going to count next year towards the squad cost ratio rules. And Saudi has an apparent endless amount of finances. We've seen all of the wacky stadiums they're planning for the World Cup that's going to be in Saudi Arabia, and the vast amounts of finances which are involved in building those stadiums. You know, Newcastle are part of that portfolio. Most of us fans thought, you know, we were slightly overlooked. You know, I personally don't think so. You know, tonight we had Tonali and Voltemade on the bench. That's more than 110, 120 million pounds worth of signings just on the bench alone. I do think that it is overdue. Yeah, hopefully the wheels are in motion now. Hopefully we'll get some news out very soon. We'll be interested to hear your views on it. Hopefully as well, this means that news on the stadium will be coming out this year as well. We know that that's way more complicated in terms of the space and the location, new stadium, old stadium, etc. I'd be very interested to hear your comments on that. Thanks very much for watching. If you like what you hear, please do give a like, subscribe and follow, and don't forget,